They sent an ultimatum. We sent a mirror. Admiral Eva Kalin stood on the command deck of the fleet carrier Vigilance, the star map's holographic glow washing over her face in cool blues and stark reds. Before her, the Caithar Dominion fleet held the Eridani Pass, a crimson line drawn across the system's primary trade lane. Behind her, the civilian convoy First to Dawn huddled its 22 transports filled with families and vital supplies for the outer colonies. The ultimatum was simple, brutal, and broadcast on all channels: surrender the convoy's lead vessel, the Stellaron, for alleged sanction violations, or the entire convoy would be destroyed. A crimson timer pulsed silently in the corner of the main display. Show 2 hours. The demand was an insult wrapped in a threat, a classic Caithar power play designed to humiliate and dominate. They operated on a doctrine of absolute compliance where any negotiation was weakness, and any resistance was a prelude to annihilation. Kalin's fleet, the Third Expeditionary, was smaller, nimbler, and built on a philosophy the Dominion could not comprehend. Her orders were clear: protect the convoy, de-escalate if possible, but hold the line. The tension on the bridge was a physical weight, a low thrum that vibrated up from the deck plates. Lyra status on the Caithar disposition, Kalin said, her voice calm and even. The fleet mind's synthesized voice, a soothing contralto, filled the space. Unchanged, Admiral. 20 heavy cruisers in a standard blockade formation. They are broadcasting their ultimatum on a loop layered with public comms frequencies to ensure the convoy crews hear it. Heart rates among the civilian ships are elevated by 40%. Kalin nodded, her gaze fixed on the enemy line. They want to terrorize them into compliance. They want the flock to offer up a sheep. Their doctrine was a hammer. Ours was a lens. Her tactical officer, Commander Jian, stepped forward, her face a mask of controlled anger. We can't let them take the Stellaron. Its captain is a decorated veteran. Their claim is baseless, a pretense for a show of force. The faint scent of ozone from the overworked tactical display filled the air around Jian's console. Kalin appreciated her fire but needed her focus. The clock was ticking, and every second spent on outrage was a second lost on a solution. This was not a fight to be won with indignation. A small cabin aboard the convoy freighter Wanderer's Hope was quiet except for the hum of life support. A young girl named Alara pressed her face against the thick plasteel viewport, watching the distant, beautiful warships. She held a small hand-carved wooden bird, a gift from her father, who served on the Stellaron. Her mother sat behind her, stroking her hair, her own eyes fixed on the display, showing the same crimson countdown Kalin saw. She didn't understand the politics, only that the bright, dangerous ships wanted to hurt her father's vessel. We do not break under threats. We expose them. Kalin turned from the main screen to face her team. The Caithar believe in the simple ledger of power. Strength dictates truth. They have presented us with a bill, and they expect us to pay it with fear. She tapped a control on her command chair's armrest, bringing up a complex energy schematic. But their ledger only has one column. Ours has two. Lyra's avatar, a simple glowing blue sphere, pulsed gently beside the schematic. The logic was cold, but the intent was protective. Lyra begins spooling the mirror lattice. Deploy the first 10 decoy drones pattern Delta. I want them running hot, mimicking the Stellaron's energy signature perfectly. Kalin's orders were crisp, each one a carefully placed stone in the foundation of her response. The hum of the ship deepened as massive capacitors began to charge, a promise of action stirring in the vessel's heart. Commander Jian's fingers flew across her console, translating the Admiral's intent into precise fleet commands. The first phase of their answer was not a weapon, but a question. They demanded a sacrifice. We offered a reflection. The Cathar commander, Grand Voivode Malachor, watched his tactical display with immense satisfaction. The human fleet was holding position, a clear sign of indecision. Their smaller ships were no match for his cruisers, and their reputation for restraint was in his view a fatal weakness. He had issued ultimata to a dozen lesser species and had never been defied. The humans would break just like all the others. He leaned back in his command throne, the polished metal cool against his armored back, and savored the impending victory. Voivode, we detect energy fluctuations from the human fleet, his sensor officer reported, his voice flat. Multiple small signatures detaching from their carrier. Malachor grunted. Probes. A last-ditch scan. Their energy profiles are identical to the convoy's lead ship, Voivode. We are now tracking 11 vessels with the exact signature of the Stellaron. Their certainty was their greatest blindness. A frown creased Malachor's hardened features. He zoomed in on the tactical plot. 11 identical markers now moved in a loose, unpredictable swarm between the human fleet and the convoy. It was a simple decoy tactic, an annoyance. It changed nothing. Track them all. Target the original. The ultimatum stands. He would not be distracted by such childish games. His will's iron and his doctrine was absolute. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero. On the Vigilance, the bridge was a hive of focused activity. The low glare of consoles reflected in the crew's eyes, each person a vital part of the unfolding strategy. Lattice is at 70% charge, Admiral Lyra reported. Decoy swarm is stable and mirroring telemetry. The Cathar are taking the bait. They've locked weapons on the true Stellaron. Kalen allowed a small, grim smile. Predictable. Their doctrine made them rigid. Their arrogance made them blind. They saw a target, not a trap. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Commander Jian, execute Phase 2. Have the decoys begin a randomized acceleration sequence, and tell the Stellaron to start bleeding energy from its primary shield emitter, just enough to look like a minor fault. Kalen's plan was a delicate dance of deception. She wasn't just hiding the target. She was painting a new one that appealed to the Cathar's predatory instincts. A wounded animal was always the first to be taken down. The vibration of the deck plates shifted slightly as the ship reallocated power. Malachor watched as one of the 11 signatures flickered on his display. Its shield strength dropped by a few percentage points. His tactical officer immediately highlighted it. Voivode. We have a partial systems failure on one of the targets. It matches the location of the original Stellaron. The Voivode's lip curled into a sneer. How pathetic. The humans' technology was as fragile as their resolve. Confirm lock on the failing signature. Prepare to fire on my command. We hold the line with patience, not power. Aboard the Stellaron, Captain Eva Rostova gripped the armrests of her chair. Her ship was now the designated bait, a role she accepted with quiet pride. Her crew worked calmly, running diagnostics and rerouting power as instructed by the Vigilance. They were professionals and they trusted their admiral. They knew the Third Expeditionary did not waste the lives of its people. The scent of hot metal from a deliberately overloaded power conduit hung in the air, adding a layer of realism to their deception. Their trust was Kalen's greatest weapon. Kalen watched the Cathar cruisers shift their heavy weapon emplacements, all swiveling to track the wounded Stellaron. They were like sharks smelling blood in the water, their focus narrowing to a single point. Lyra, what is the probability they will fire before the timer expires? She asked, her voice steady. The countdown now read 01:15:42. Based on past encounters with Grand Voivode Malachor, There is an 82% probability he will act prematurely to emphasize his dominance. The AI responded instantly. He believes a display of overwhelming force is the most effective form of communication. He is about to get a lesson in ours, Kalen murmured. Their strength was a wall. Ours was a door. The mirror lattice was a marvel of human engineering. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a vast, deployable array of graviton lenses and energy reflectors capable of capturing, storing, and redirecting immense amounts of energy. Deployed, it was nearly invisible, a shimmer in space that bent light and sensor waves around it. It was now positioned perfectly between the Kithar fleet and the convoy, a silent, waiting arbiter. Its power cells were at 98%. Ready. Admiral multiple weapon locks confirmed on the decoy. Jian reported her knuckles white on her console. They're charging main cannons. The bridge grew quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's systems and the faint rhythmic pulse of the ultimatum clock. The air grew thick with anticipation. Kalen's heart beat a steady, measured rhythm against her ribs, a human anchor in a sea of cold technology. Let them write the bill, we will set the price. The Kithar cruisers fired. A storm of brilliant crimson energy lances 20 bolts of focused destruction crossed the void in an instant. They were aimed not to disable but to obliterate the single wounded ship. It was a statement of absolute power, a demonstration of the cost of defiance. Malachor smiled. It was a beautiful sight. The ultimatum would be met, and the humans would learn their place. The universe operated on simple, unshakable rules. But as the energy beams reached their target, they did not impact. Instead, they vanished. The space where the decoy Stellaron had been moments before was suddenly empty. The decoy drone, its job done, had jumped to slipspace an instant before the volley arrived. And in its place, the mirror lattice activated. The shimmer in space became a vast, incandescent web of light. Their fire was about to become their shame. The 20 lances of crimson energy were caught, bent, and focused by the lattice. The system was designed for precision, not brute force. It didn't just reflect the energy, it reshaped it. The raw power of the Kithar volley, intended to be an executioner's axe, was instantly converted into a searingly precise sculptor's tool. The bridge of the Vigilance was bathed in the light of the external monitors, a silent, awe-inspiring display of physics in action. Grand Voivode Malachor's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief. The energy hadn't dissipated. It had been caught. Before he could process the impossibility of what he was seeing, the lattice fired back. It did not return the 20 beams to his cruisers. That would have been an act of war, an escalation Kalen was not willing to make. Lyra's calculations were far more elegant, far more damning. The account is open. The ledger will be filled. The captured energy, now a single impossibly bright lance of pure white light, was not aimed at a warship. It was aimed at the empty space directly in front of Malachor's flagship. The beams struck nothing, but its passage was not without effect. It was tuned to a specific frequency, the one used by the Kithar for their public ultimatum broadcast. For a fraction of a second, the beam pulsed, encoding a message into the very fabric of their transmission. Across the system, on every civilian comms channel, on every Kithar bridge, the looping threat of the ultimatum was suddenly overwritten. A single clear image appeared, the 20 crimson beams from their own fleet, converging and being caught. It was followed by a simple, brutal piece of data telemetry, stark white on a black background. It showed the trajectory of the volley, its intended target, and its point of origin. It was an undeniable, unedited recording of their own attempted murder of a civilian vessel. Their own weapons became the witness to their crime. Then the mirror lattice did something else. It redirected the remaining 99% of the captured energy, not as a weapon, but as a signal. A single massive, harmless pulse of light erupted from the lattice, aimed away from any ship out into the deep black of the system. But it was on a frequency used by the Galactic Concordiate Monitoring Service. It was a flare, a distress call, and a notification of a treaty violation all in one. It was a call for auditors. Malachor stared, his mind struggling to catch up. He had not been attacked. He had been documented. His act of aggression had been captured, notarized, and submitted as evidence to the highest authority in the sector using the very energy he had supplied. The humiliation was a physical blow, colder and sharper than any weapon. His crew stared at their consoles, then at him, their disciplined fear now mixed with a new corrosive element, doubt. We do not answer anger with anger. We answer it with math. On the vigilance, a collective breath was released. The tension did not vanish, but it transformed. The immediate threat had been neutralized not by force, but by a perfect strategic reversal. Kaylin felt the slight tremor in her hands begin to subside. Lyra, give me a casualty report from the convoy. She ordered, her first thought, as always, for the civilians. 0 casualties, Admiral, the AI confirmed. Panic levels are decreasing. We are seeing a surge of encrypted communications from the convoy, mostly expressions of gratitude. A low murmur of approval went through the bridge crew. They had held the line. They had protected the innocent. The cost had been the energy for the decoys, and the lattice a negligible expense. The gain was immeasurable. They thought it was a battlefield. We made it a classroom. The ultimatum timer on the main screen still pulsed, a ridiculous, impotent reminder of a threat that had already been defanged. It read 102:17. Malachor had not waited. He had acted on arrogance and assumption, and Kaylin's strategy had turned his own doctrine against him. She had not attacked his ships. She had attacked his credibility. In the long game of interstellar politics and power, that was a far more devastating blow. Admiral Jian said, a note of awe in her voice. The Caithar fleet is holding position, but their weapon ports are closing. They are uncertain. Uncertainty is the beginning of education, Kaylin replied. They have never been shown that their actions have consequences beyond their own desired outcome. Today, their ledger has a new entry written in their own hand. Brace for the counter. The first lesson is always the hardest. Grand Voivode Malachor felt a cold fury building within him, a rage that burned away his shock. He had been made a fool. The humans had not fought him. They had reported him like a child tattling to a teacher. The Concordiate would launch an inquiry. There would be sanctions. His command would be scrutinized. It was intolerable. His doctrine did not allow for this kind of defeat. An ultimatum given must be an ultimatum enforced. All ships, he snarled, his voice a low growl that carried over the bridge comms. Reopen weapon ports. Target their carrier, the Vigilance. I will not be mocked by these merchants of calculus. He was doubling down. He was rejecting the lesson and choosing to break the chalkboard. The logic of his doctrine demanded it. An unanswered insult was a greater defeat than a lost battle. Their pride demanded a reckoning. The Caithar cruisers began to shift formation, their movements sluggish with disbelief but obedient. The massive energy signatures of their main cannons began to build again. This time there was no pretense, no targeting of a civilian vessel. This was a direct challenge, fleet to fleet. An act of open war. The timer on the screen was now irrelevant, a ghost of a threat that had been superseded by a much more visceral one. Kalen's expression hardened. The first phase had been a lesson in consequences. The second would be a lesson in costs. Lyra, what is his tactical objective? He knows the Concordiat is watching. This is irrational. The low thrum of the Vigilance's engines deepened as the ship prepared for combat maneuvers. The air on the bridge grew cold, the earlier relief evaporating like mist. Malakor's profile indicates a severe aversion to public humiliation. Lyra stated, her calm voice a stark contrast to the escalating tension. He is sacrificing strategic advantage for personal vindication. He intends to cripple us, believing a swift, decisive victory will mitigate the political fallout. He is calculating that a destroyed enemy cannot testify. A flawed calculation, Kalen said softly. Jian, bring us about. Show them our broadside. Deploy the rest of the drone swarm combat configuration. And Lyra, open the ledger. It's time to settle this account. Our ledger is written in light and paid in time. The civilian vessels of the first Dawn convoy were accelerating away their drives, glowing like frightened fireflies. Their crews watched the unfolding confrontation with a mixture of terror and hope. In a small lounge on the Stellaron, Captain Rostova stood with her senior officers, their eyes glued to the tactical display. They were safe, but the fleet that had protected them was now in mortal danger. They felt a profound, aching sense of debt. The space between the two fleets crackled with energy. The Caithar, committed to their attack, moved into a standard assault wedge designed to concentrate firepower and punch through an enemy's defenses. It was a textbook formation, powerful and predictable. It was exactly what Kalen and Lyra had anticipated. Their fleet was not a static line to be broken. It was a fluid, dynamic system designed to turn an opponent's momentum into a liability. They charged a solid wall, ignorant of the gate. Admiral, they are committing their entire forward element. Jian reported, her voice tight but focused. Range is closing. They will be in optimal firing position in 90 seconds. The console in front of her shimmered with targeting solutions and firing vectors, a deadly web of possibilities. 90 seconds is an eternity, Commander Kalen replied. She watched the crimson icons of the Caithar ships advance. They see us as a single target, the Vigilance. They are wrong. She made a small gesture with her hand, a silent command to the fleet mind. Lyra now. Open the corridor. Hold the breath. Hold the line, open the path. The human fleet moved. It did not retreat. It opened. The smaller frigates and destroyers that had flanked the Vigilance suddenly accelerated, peeling away in two perfectly timed formations. They created a wide, seemingly clear channel leading directly to the carrier. It was a shocking maneuver, one that looked like a panicked, disorganized retreat. It was an invitation, an open gate in the center of their fortress. Malachor saw the opening and laughed, a harsh, grating sound. They break, their line has shattered. All ships concentrate fire on the carrier. Push through the gap, annihilate them. His commanders obeyed instantly, surging forward into the corridor, eager to land the killing blow. Their wedge formation compressed, becoming a spear aimed at the heart of the human fleet. Their single-minded focus on the carrier, the prize, was absolute. They thought it was a corridor. It was a cage. But the corridor was not empty. As the Caithar ships plunged into the space between the human vessels, the mirror lattice, which had repositioned itself, pulsed. It did not fire a weapon. It projected a series of complex, overlapping gravitic fields. These were not powerful enough to damage the cruisers, but they had a more subtle effect. They warped sensor readings. They bent light. They created ghosts. Suddenly, the Caithar sensors were screaming with false readings. Dozens of phantom human ships appeared on their flanks. The open corridor was now, according to their screens, a dense thicket of hostiles. It was a classic information warfare tactic designed to sow chaos and paralyze command. But it was only the first part of the trap. The coolant hiss from a nearby conduit was the only sound Kalen heard for a moment, a steady rhythm beneath the storm. Their sensors lied. Their engines did not. Malakor's bridge was in chaos. Officers shouted conflicting reports. Phantoms flickered in and out of existence on the tactical display. But the voivode was a veteran. He trusted his eyes more than his sensors. "Ignore the ghosts," he bellowed. "Press the attack. The carrier is still ahead." He was right. The vigilance was still there, seemingly vulnerable. He refused to be distracted. And that was his final mistake. Because the trap was not the ghosts on his sensors. The trap was the corridor itself. As his fleet raced forward, the human ships that had peeled away did not stop. They curved back, their movements precise and calculated. They were not retreating. They were executing a pincer movement on a system-wide scale. The open corridor was rapidly becoming a closed box. "Lyra, spring the trap," Kalen ordered, her voice like ice. "The box is closed. The account is due." The human frigates and destroyers that now formed the walls of the corridor activated their own short-range mirror arrays. These were not the massive energy-capturing lattices, but smaller tactical versions. The Kithar were now surrounded by reflective surfaces. And then Kalen's fleet fired. But they did not fire at the Kithar. They fired at each other. Beams of golden lancelight shot from the ships on one side of the corridor, not towards the enemy, but towards their sister ships on the other side. For a nanosecond, it looked like a catastrophic friendly fire incident. But the beams never struck. They hit the mirror arrays of the receiving ships and were instantly perfectly reflected inward. Their own formation became their prison. The space inside the corridor, now crowded with the charging Kithar fleet, was instantly filled with a storm of ricocheting energy. Beams of light bounced from array to array, creating a cage of pure energy. It was a kill box turned inside out. The Kithar ships, packed tightly together in their pursuit of the vigilance, had no room to maneuver. They were trapped in the web of their own making, their aggressive formation now a fatal liability. Shields flared and died under the onslaught from a dozen directions at once. Armor plating designed to repel attacks from the front was sliced apart from the sides and rear. Malakor watched in horror as his proud assault wedge tore itself apart. The energy wasn't overwhelming. It was simply unavoidable. Every escape vector was another impact angle. The cold, beautiful geometry of the trap was inescapable. They paid for their aggression with their hulls. On the Vigilance, the bridge crew watched in silent, grim efficiency. There was no cheering, no celebration. This was not a victory to be savored. It was a lesson being administered, a painful but necessary correction to a violent doctrine. The light from the kill box flashed against the bridge, illuminating their focused faces. A cost of this maneuver was a massive drain on their fleet's energy reserves. Power levels across the human ships dipped into the amber, a tangible price for the perfect execution. "Admiral, we have catastrophic systems failure across their forward elements," Jian reported, her voice quiet. "Multiple ships are disabled. They are no longer a cohesive fighting force." "Cease fire," Kalen commanded instantly. "Open a channel to Voivode Malakor. Patch it through to my command chair. We teach. We do not annihilate." The channel opened. On the main screen, the face of Grand Voivoda Malakor appeared. He was framed by smoke and sparking consoles. His uniform was torn, and a trickle of blue blood ran from a cut on his forehead. But his eyes burned with a defiant, unbroken hatred. He had been beaten, but he was not defeated. His pride was still intact, a shard of sharp glass in the wreckage of his fleet. Human, he spat the word an insult. You think this clever trick wins you the day you have only signed your own death warrant. The Dominion will answer this. An entire legion will come for you. They will burn your worlds for this insult. Kaelin met his gaze without flinching. Her own face was calm, her voice measured. This was not an insult, Voivode. It was a reckoning. You issued an ultimatum based on a lie. You attempted to execute civilians. You initiated hostilities against a Concordiate allied fleet. We did not fire the first shot. In fact, we have yet to fire a single shot at you. Their own firepower returned to sender. She gestured to the tactical display which now showed a clear replay of the battle. The energy that crippled your fleet was your own redirected from your initial volley at the Stellaron. And the energy that just disabled your assault force was ours, yes, but it was never aimed at you. It was aimed at our own ships which returned it. We have not broken a single rule of engagement. You, on the other hand, have broken several. Malicor's face contorted in a snarl, but he had no reply. She was right. The cold, infuriating truth of it was undeniable. They had been surgically dismantled without ever being the direct target of a single weapon. The sheer deliberate precision of it was more insulting than any barrage. It was dismissive. It was the act of a superior power correcting a lesser one. The ledger is balanced not with blood, but with truth. This is your one and only chance to stand down. Kaelin continued, her voice hardening slightly. Power down your remaining weapons systems and await the arrival of the Concordiate auditors. Or we will be forced to conclude this lesson. The choice is yours. She was offering him an out, a way to survive. But she knew his doctrine, his pride. He would not take it. There is no choice, Malicor hissed. There is only victory or death. Doctrine is absolute. Behind him, his remaining cruisers began to power their weapons again, a final desperate act of defiance. They were damaged, disorganized, but still dangerous. Kaelin sighed softly. A flicker of regret crossed her face. So be it. She looked away from the screen towards her own crew. Lyra, he has refused the terms. Close the account. A debt of violence must be paid in full. The human fleet moved again, its grace belying its lethal intent. The trap had been sprung, the lesson offered and rejected. Now came the final, unavoidable consequence. The ships of the Third Expeditionary stopped firing at each other and took direct aim. The precision and elegance of the earlier maneuvers were gone, replaced by the grim necessity of overwhelming force. The time for teaching was over. In a small medbay on the destroyer Steadfast, a medic was treating a crewman for a minor plasma burn, a result of a power surge during the lattice reflection. The injury was not severe, but it was a stark reminder that even a perfect plan carried a cost. The ship shuddered as its main cannons fired a deep, resonant boom that vibrated through the hull. The price of peace was sometimes steep. They chose the storm. We will be the tide. The final volley from the human fleet was not a cage of light. It was a hammer blow. It was targeted with Lyra's flawless precision. It struck not the bridges or the life support of the remaining Kethar ships, but their engine compartments and weapon arrays. It was a volley designed not to kill, but to permanently disable, to render the threat inert, to take the teeth from the snarling wolf without stopping its heart. Explosions blossomed in the void, silent but brilliant. One by one, the remaining Kythar cruisers went dark and silent, their engines dead, their weapon ports fused slag. They were left adrift, helpless husks of their former power. All except one. Malakor's flagship, the indomitable Will, was spared the volley. It floated alone amidst the wreckage of its command. We leave the monument to their mistake. Kalen watched the last of the enemy power signatures fade from the tactical map. The battle was over. Her fleet was intact with only minor energy drains and a few superficial scorch marks on the hulls of the forward destroyers. She had upheld her orders. She had protected the convoy. She had met aggression with a strength tempered by mercy. But the image of Malakor's hateful eyes remained burned into her mind. "Open a channel to the flagship," again she said. "Audio only." The channel hissed open. "Voivode Malakor." Kalen stated, her voice echoing in the sudden silence of his ruined bridge. "Your fleet is disabled. Your ultimatum is void. You are a threat no more. We are leaving you and your crew for the Concordiat to retrieve. They will find your logs, your recordings, and the undeniable truth of what happened here today." There was no response but the sound of labored breathing. "You followed your doctrine to its logical conclusion." Kalen finished, her voice softening, not with pity, but with a profound sense of finality. "And now you see where it leads. Not to glory, but to this. Silence. Defeat. A lesson for your entire dominion to learn." She closed the channel. The lesson was concluded. The human fleet began to reform its ships, moving with a quiet, practiced grace. The convoy, which had been holding at a safe distance, began to spool its drives for the final jump to the colonies. The little girl Ilara was back at the window, watching the friendly ships gather. The scary red lights were gone. Her father was safe. She smiled, holding her wooden bird tight. Aboard the Vigilance, the bridge was calm. The scent of ozone had faded, replaced by the clean, sterile air of the ship's filtration system. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, running post-action diagnostics. Lyra began compiling the full incident report. For the Concordiat, Kalen ordered, turning away from the main screen. "Cross-reference all our sensor logs with the broadcast data we captured from the Caithar ultimatum. Leave no room for ambiguity." "Already underway," Admiral the Fleet Mind replied. "The preliminary report is damning for the Voivode. It confirms 7 distinct violations of the Eridani Pass Treaty." "Good," Kalen said. She felt the deep weariness of command settle over her, a weight heavier than any G-force. She had made the right choices. She had saved lives. But she had also been forced to inflict a terrible, crushing defeat. It was a victory, but it did not feel triumphant. It felt necessary. She walked to the large viewport at the front of the bridge, looking out at the starfield and the crippled enemy ships. A field of broken hammers silenced by a mirror. "Our mercy is a weapon. Our patience a shield." Commander Jian came to stand beside her. "They will not forget this, Admiral." "I know," Kalen said. "But with luck, they will remember why it happened. They will remember that an ultimatum is a promise of violence, and that such promises can be returned to the sender." She watched as the first of the Concordiat patrol ships warped into the system, its blue and white running lights, a symbol of the order they had fought to preserve. The auditors had arrived. The accounting was about to become official. The precedent was about to be set. The Dominion's favorite tool, the ultimatum, had been proven to be a double-edged sword. Kalen wondered how they would adapt. Would they learn the lesson, or would they simply build a bigger hammer? Only time would tell. But for today, the line had been held. The convoy was safe, and the ledger was balanced. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the deck as the Vigilance prepared to escort the convoy on the final leg of its journey. They believed the universe bent to the loudest voice. Admiral Lyra's voice cut through her thoughts. I have finished my analysis of the Caithar fleet's wreckage and their final communications before we disabled them. There is something you need to see. The AI's tone was different. It held a note of something Kalen had rarely heard from the logic-driven entity concern. What is it? Lyra, the ultimatum was not the Voivode's primary objective. It was a pretext. His orders contained a secondary sealed directive, which he activated after his fleet was trapped. A new window opened on the main display. It showed a string of encrypted data now partially decoded. It was a transmission sent from Malakor's ship not to his superiors, but to a hidden listening post deep in unclaimed space. We showed them it bent to the clearest truth. Kalen's eyes narrowed as she read the decoded fragments. Human fleet composition confirmed. Mirror lattice capability verified. Phase 2 authorized. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a simple border skirmish or a test of dominance. It was an intelligence-gathering mission. They hadn't been testing the Third Expeditionary's resolve. They had been testing its technology. Malakor's attack had been a sacrifice, a deliberate probe to gauge the full extent of the mirror lattice's capabilities. He wasn't trying to win, Kalen whispered, the realization dawning on her with sickening clarity. He was trying to make us show our hand. His defeat was part of his mission. The entire confrontation was reframed. The arrogant voivode wasn't a fool blinded by pride. He was a martyr for a larger cause. He had been ordered to provoke them into using their most advanced defensive technology, and he had succeeded. His defiance, his final suicidal charge, it was all a show. A test given, a test passed, a new war begun. Lyra, who sent that secondary order, Kalen demanded, her mind racing ahead, connecting dots she hadn't even seen before. The Caithar Dominion was aggressive, but they were not this subtle. This had the hallmarks of a different player, someone who operated from the shadows. The encryption is old, Admiral, very old. It doesn't match any known Caithar military or intelligence codes, the AI responded. It predates the Dominion itself. But it does have markers consistent with one entity, the species the Caithar call the Architects, the ones who allegedly uplifted them centuries ago. The Architects, a mythical, almost legendary species spoken of only in whispers. They were rumored to be the master strategists of the galaxy, playing factions against each other in a game of cosmic chess that spanned millennia. They had never been seen, never been confirmed, until now. The Caithar were not the hammer. They were just the hand that held it. A larger shadow falls. A wider game is revealed. Kalen stared at the disabled fleet, no longer seeing a defeated enemy, but a discarded tool. Malakor had not been making a choice between victory and death. He had been following a script. The ultimatum, the attack, the defeat. It had all been a performance for an unseen audience, and the Third Expeditionary had played its part to perfection. They had revealed their trump card, their ability to turn an enemy's power against them to a foe they didn't even know they had. The cool, quiet hum of the bridge now felt sinister, the silence pregnant with a new, more profound threat. The first lesson had been concluded, yes. But school was far from over. A much older, much more patient teacher was watching, and they had just been given the full curriculum. Admiral, the Concordiate patrol vessel Arbiter is on approach, Commander Gian reported, her voice pulling Kalen from the chilling revelation. Captain Thrace is hailing us. He's asking for a situation report. The request was standard procedure, but now it felt like a test. Kalen's mind reeled with the implications of the Architects. Sharing this information prematurely could trigger widespread panic, or worse, alert the hidden enemy that their gambit had been discovered. She had to control the narrative not just for the Concordiate, but for the unseen audience that was surely still watching. Her victory was a liability, and her knowledge was a weapon she did not yet know how to wield. On screen, Kaylin set her composure, a carefully constructed fortress. The face of a stern, graying human captain appeared. "Captain Thrace, this is Admiral Kaylin of the Vigilance. We've had a minor border dispute. The situation is contained." Their game was long. Ours had just begun. Captain Thrace raised a skeptical eyebrow. The field of disabled Kythar cruisers behind Kaylin's fleet was hardly a minor dispute. "Admiral, my long-range sensors paint a different picture. I'm reading 20 disabled hostiles. That's more than a dispute. That's a rout." "What was the provocation?" The Kythar fleet, under the command of Grand Voivode Malakor, issued an ultimatum against a civilian convoy and initiated an unprovoked attack on our defensive screen, Kaylin stated, choosing her words with surgical precision. "We responded with a new, non-lethal countermeasure system. We disabled their ships to prevent further aggression and loss of life on both sides." She was telling the truth, but an edited version of it. The why was her secret to keep. A truth untold is not the same as a lie. Thrace seemed to accept the explanation for now. The Third Expeditionary's reputation for de-escalation was well known. "Understood, Admiral. We will begin processing the Kythar vessels and their crews. My report will commend your restraint." The formal praise felt hollow. Kaylin had shown restraint, and it had been exactly the wrong move for the real war she now found herself in. She had simply followed the script written for her. "Before your teams take over, Captain, my own damage control, crews need to board the Voivode's flagship," Kaylin added smoothly. "We need to ensure his reactor is stable and retrieve his logs as primary evidence for your inquiry." It was a plausible request, one Thrace could not easily refuse. But the real prize was not the logs. It was the hidden message, the link to the architects. The console beside her flickered its light, a cold reflection in her determined eyes. They set the stage. We would now inspect the rigging. A small team of combat engineers and intelligence specialists led by Commander Jian crossed the void in a shielded shuttle. The Kythar flagship, Indomitable Will, was a silent, wounded giant. Its hull was scored with fused plasma marks, but its primary structure was intact. As they entered the ship, the scent of burnt electronics and leaked atmospheric coolant filled their helmets. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows down the corridors. It was a ghost ship, its crew secured in the mess hall, awaiting Concordiate processing. Jian's team moved with quiet urgency, their boots echoing on the metal deck. Their destination was the bridge, the heart of the ship, where Malakor's final secret transmission had originated. They were not there for salvage. They were on a search for a single invisible needle in a haystack of dead data. The low hum of their suit systems was the only sound in the oppressive silence. A battle ended. A hunt began. Lyra's voice came through their private comms, a calm guide in the darkness. The transmission's point of origin was a secondary console to the left of the command throne. "It was likely wiped, but I am searching for residual data echoes in the ship's tertiary memory buffers. Be prepared to attach a quantum tap directly to the core." The AI was already working, sifting through layers of Kythar code to find the alien fingerprint hidden beneath. On the bridge, Jian found the console. It was dark, inert. But as her tech specialist knelt to open the access panel, a faint energy signature pulsed from within. It was not Kythar technology. It was a small, crystalline device no bigger than her thumb grafted crudely onto the ship's systems. It was a parasite leeching power and data. As the specialist reached for it, the crystal flared with a blinding light. Their traps had traps. "Jian, get back." Kalen's voice crackled over the comm. Lyra had detected the energy spike. It's a logic bomb. It's trying to infect your suit systems and piggyback to the vigilance. Jian reacted instantly, shoving her specialist back and drawing her sidearm. She didn't fire. Instead, she slammed the butt of the weapon against the console's emergence cut off a physical switch that severed the unit from the ship's power. The crystal flared one last time and then went dark. Its attempt to spread its infection thwarted by a simple, brutal act. The cost was a sprained wrist for Jian and a jolt of feedback that fried two of the specialist's diagnostic tools. A ghost in the machine is still a target. The device is neutralized, as Admiral Jian reported, her breathing heavy. But it's not dead. It seems to be waiting. It was waiting for a network connection. It wanted us to take it home, Kalen murmured, standing on the bridge of the Vigilance. The sheer audacity of the architects was staggering. They had seeded their trap with another, a gift for the curious victor. Leave it. Lyra has what she needs. The AI had captured the device's energy signature and the first few packets of its malicious code before the cutoff. It was enough. The hunt was back on. Their deception was a breadcrumb. We would follow the trail. Back on the Vigilance, Lyra worked for hours dissecting the fragments of code. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It did not operate on binary logic. It was multi-layered probabilistic and seemed to learn as it was being analyzed. It was less a program and more a digital organism. But within its labyrinthine structure, Lyra found what she was looking for, a routing address. A signature that pointed not to a place but to a method of communication. Admiral, the architects do not use fixed locations, Lyra explained, her avatar glowing with intense processing power. They exist as a distributed network across thousands of covert nodes. They hide in plain sight, using the background noise of galactic communications as their medium. This device was a high-level node designed to observe and report. Its code gives us a way to listen for their sound amidst the static. Their greatest strength was their invisibility. Kalen absorbed the information. You can't fight an enemy you can't find, but you also can't hide from an enemy who knows how you whisper. Can you track them? Not in a conventional sense, Lyra replied, but I can now identify their activity. I can see their influence. It is extensive. They have similar nodes embedded in the systems of at least a dozen other species, including several Concordiate members. They are not just watching us. They are watching everyone. The scale of the manipulation was breathtaking. The entire galaxy was a chessboard, and most of the pieces didn't even know they were in the game. We would have to become the ghosts that hunt the shadows. Days turned into weeks. The Vigilance escorted the first dawn convoy to its destination, a celebratory arrival that felt muted and distant to Kalen and her crew. They had a new secret mandate. While the Concordiate debated sanctions against the Kythar, Kalen and Lyra listened. They mapped the faint, almost undetectable whispers of the architect network. They were building a new kind of star map, one not of planets and stars, but of influence and control. They discovered the architect's primary method. They introduced doctrines. They seeded ideas into aggressive expansionist cultures like the Kythar ultimatums, sacrificial tactics, philosophies of absolute strength, and then watched them play out. They used entire species as lab rats in a galactic experiment of strategy and response. The purpose was still unknown, but the method was now terrifyingly clear. They were the ultimate puppet masters. Their strings were ideas, their puppets were empires. The civilian crew of the freighter Star Treader enjoyed their downtime at a bustling trade hub. They shared stories of their recent passage through the Eridani Pass, tales of the Crimson Kythar fleet, and the silent, brilliant response of the Third Expeditionary. Their story, repeated in a dozen languages, in a dozen cantinas, became a legend. It was a story of hope of a fleet that fought with light and logic instead of just brute force. They did not know they were also spreading the first part of Kalen's new plan. Lyra, the story of the mirror lattice, is spreading, Kalen noted, observing galactic information traffic. How will the architects react to this? They will see it as a predictable consequence, the AI analyzed. A heroic narrative is forming around our technology. This will increase demand for it. Other species will want their own mirror to protect them. The architects will see this as an opportunity. They will try to control the narrative and the technology. Exactly, Kalen said, a plan beginning to form in her mind, a counter-gambit of immense risk. They expect us to hoard our best technology. They expect us to keep the mirror lattice a secret. That is the logical, prudent military thing to do. We would answer their prediction with a revolution. She convened a secure meeting with Concordiat High Command. She did not mention the architects. The name was too dangerous, the proof too circumstantial. Instead, she framed her proposal in the language of peace and shared security. The Eridani incident proves that overwhelming force can be countered without mass casualties, she argued. The principles behind the mirror lattice should not be the exclusive property of the human fleet. I propose we release a simplified defensive-only version of the schematics into the public Concordiat database for planetary defense grids only. The proposal was met with stunned silence, then a storm of protest from her own military superiors. It was madness to give away their single greatest technological advantage. But Kalen was persuasive. She argued that proliferation of a defensive system would raise the cost of aggression for everyone, creating a more stable galaxy. It was a compelling, idealistic argument. Reluctantly, with heavy restrictions, the command agreed. They expected a fortress. We gave them an open hand. Lyra monitored the architect network. As Kalen had predicted, the moment the simplified schematics went public, the whispers started. The architects saw the move not as idealism, but as arrogance. The humans believed their technology was so superior, they could simply give it away. They saw an opportunity to turn this gift into a galaxy-spanning vulnerability. It was the exact move Kalen and Lyra had been waiting for. They are active, Admiral. Lyra reported, her voice humming with processing power. Multiple nodes are working in concert. They are preparing what I can only describe as a corruption packet, a Trojan horse. They are going to help alter the public schematics, introducing a subtle, undetectable flaw, a resonance frequency, backdoor, that would allow them to disable or even destroy any lattice built from their version. Their poison was ready. We had prepared the antidote. This was the heart of the trap. The architects, believing they were unobserved, were about to reveal themselves. Kalen had not given away her advantage. She had offered it as bait. And the enemy was taking it hook, line, and sinker. The faint vibration of the Vigilance's deck plates seemed to echo Kalen's own racing heart. Lyra, the code fragment we recovered from Malakor's ship. You said it was a key, Kalen said, her eyes fixed on the Galactic network map. Yes, Admiral. It's a digital handshake protocol, a way to say, I am one of you, to their network. Then let's use it. When they upload their prompted file, I don't want you to block it. I want you to let it in, and then I want you to piggyback our own message to their upload stream. A message for the entire architect network, sent with their own secret handshake. Their own key would unlock their own undoing. The moment came. A surge of data masked as a routine network update hit the Concordiat central servers. It was the corrupted schematic, a perfect imitation of the original, save for a few lines of malicious code. Lyra's systems watching with perfect clarity did not interfere. Instead, they acted in the nanosecond the upload was complete. Using the captured handshake protocol, Lyra attached a tiny, elegant data packet of her own to the architect's success confirmation signal. The message was not a threat. It was not an ultimatum. It was a single, perfect image, a star chart of the galaxy. On it, 1,000 points of light began to glow every architect node Lyra had identified over the past weeks. And then a simple line of text appeared beneath it, broadcast back to the puppet masters on their own private secret network. "We see you." The shadows themselves had been laid bare. Silence. For a full minute, the architect network, which had been a hive of coordinated whispers, went completely and utterly quiet. The sudden absence of their background chatter was more jarring than any explosion. It was the sound of a collective, disbelieving gasp. They had operated for millennia under a cloak of absolute invisibility. In a single moment, that cloak had been torn away. They did not know how they had been seen, only that they were. Then chaos. The network erupted in a panic. Nodes began shutting down, trying to erase themselves. The corrupted schematic on the Concordiate server was instantly and clumsily deleted by its own creators. The puppet masters exposed were cutting their own strings in a desperate attempt to flee the light. They had been so certain of their superiority, so sure of their opponent's predictability, that the simple, direct counter-move had shattered their composure. Their greatest weapon, secrecy, was now their greatest shame. Kaelin stood on the bridge watching the network map as the architect nodes vanished one by one. She had not destroyed them. She had not attacked them. She had simply shown them that they were no longer playing in the dark. She had changed the fundamental rule of their ancient game. The cost of this victory was immense. She had revealed her own greatest weapon, the knowledge of their existence. The war was not over. It had just been declared. "Lyra, send the complete, uncorrupted schematic to the Concordiate again," Kaelin ordered, "and include the full log of the data tampering along with the signature of the responsible network. Let High Command see what we are truly up against." A new precedent was now on the books. Wars of influence would be fought in the light. The institutional consequences were immediate. The Concordiate, faced with undeniable proof of a vast manipulative intelligence, created a new branch of its Security Council, the Department of Cognitive Security. Its sole purpose was to hunt for and expose doctrines of control, proxy actors, and hidden puppet masters. The age of simple fleet-on-fleet warfare was over. The age of the information war had officially begun. Weeks later, Admiral Kaelin stood looking out the viewport of the Vigilance, which was now docked at a high-orbit command station. Her new orders had arrived. The 3rd Expeditionary was being refitted and redeployed. Their new mission was not to hold a line or protect a convoy. It was to be the Concordiate's primary instrument in this new, shadowy conflict. They were to be the ghost hunters, the whisper finders, the ones who would ensure that no one ever again played with entire civilizations as if they were pieces on a board. She thought of the Caithar of Malachor. He was a pawn sacrificed for a cause he likely never fully understood. She wondered how many others were out there marching to a drumbeat they couldn't hear, following a doctrine planted in their culture by an unseen hand. The fight ahead would be longer and harder than any blockade. It would be a war of ideas, of truths and lies, of mirrors that reflected more than just energy beams. It would be a war for the right to be unpredictable, to make mistakes, to learn, and to choose one's own path. The public tally on the station's main concourse confirmed the safe arrival of 100 convoys since the Eridani Pass had been secured, a silent, growing number that spoke to the real stakes of their victory. They sent an ultimatum, a strategy rigid as iron. We answered with a mirror, a lesson sharp as glass. They followed with a shadow, a game of perfect prediction. We answered with a light, a truth they could not calculate. For they believe the arc of history is written by the powerful, a single deliberate hand, guiding the pieces to their inevitable end. We have taught them it is written by the free, and it is a story full of surprises. Their game had rules, ours has a soul.